bright portals of the sky, embossed with sparkling stars.
It has been said that taking the lead is never easy. Sometimes it is a choice or even a pursuit. To be great or even good at anything requires study, commitment, and work. Unless you are naturally gifted, which most of us are not, the expectation is that it will be a never-ending pursuit. The late Dr. Gary Burgess spent his entire adult life committed to the opera. First as a student and then as an educator and performer, he spent a considerable amount of time away from Bermuda. As a tenor, he went on to sing on many of the world's great opera stages, sharing them with the who's who of the opera world.
That voice, I know that voice. Where are you? Who are you? Speak to me.
I think it's real weird that, we produced an opera singer, or somebody that high in classical music. He was what I call a Renaissance man and appreciated just about everything in terms of culture, classical things, whether it be furniture, art, music.
There's no one here, yet I'm sure I heard a woman's voice. Perhaps you did. What was your imagination?
Gary Burgess's journey to being an opera performer and educator began in the 1950s as a teenager in Bermuda. He was already making a name for himself by singing at events around Bermuda and as a student at the Berklee Institute. He excelled in music exams where his music teacher, the legendary Joseph Richards, encouraged him to pursue music. But he began pre-med studies at Wilberforce University on a 3-year scholarship from the AME Church in 1957. It was in his second year that he switched to music. He said, "I sang solos with the school chorus from the moment I went to college, and I quickly found myself in the music building more than in my science labs." At Wilberforce, he earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in voice and music education in 1961. From there, he attended private studies at the Juilliard School of Music for 2 years, and then on a 3-year scholarship offered by the Italian government, he attended the Academy of St. Cecilia in Rome. By the mid-60s, he was teaching choral music at Niagara Wheatfield High School and fencing at the local YMCA, and then enrolling himself in summer studies at the Eastman School of Music in nearby Rochester. He left teaching and gained a Master of Music degree in voice at Indiana University as a student of famed opera singer Margaret Harshaw.
Tell me, no man cared for my soul.
He followed Harshaw to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia in 1973. He returned to Indiana University in 1979 and earned his doctorate of musical arts.
He went as far as to get a PhD, but to go that far showed his commitment to whatever he did.
In 1973, Gary made both his American and European opera debuts. First in Philadelphia with San Francisco Opera in a production of Boris Godunov, and then with the Greek National Opera as Bacchus in Strauss's Ariadne of Naxos. Gary Burgess made 20 appearances with San Francisco Opera between 1973 and 1975. During this run, he went on to perform with other greats like Jose Carreras, Joan Sutherland, and Kirite Kanawa. He was also appearing with the Greek National Opera during this period in productions such as The Rake's Progress and The Rape of Lucretia. Gary Burgess appeared on stages from Jackson, Mississippi to Philadelphia, but he made Buffalo, New York, home, where he took on a role at the State University of New York at Buffalo as Associate Professor of Music and the Director of the Opera Workshop in 1976. There, he directed student productions and performed in many faculty performances, the latter being very important to him. In an interview with the Mid-Ocean News in 1982, he said, "There are hundreds of teachers that don't sing and are still teaching. I always want to show the students that I can still do it."
He had an incredibly thorough grasp of the skills and the knowledge that you require to become a successful singer. And I think even more importantly, he knew how to convey that knowledge to people. He knew how to teach. He was inclined to tailor his approach to the individual student rather than try to force the student to conform to a sort of predetermined, like, one-size-fits-all approach, right? And I think that flexibility in his approach may have been his greatest asset as a teacher. It's certainly something that I adopted in my own approach to teaching, and I suspect a lot of his protégés that have gone on to teach would probably say the same thing.
In 1979, he was cast as Basil, the male lead in A Bayou Legend, a made-for-television film based on the opera of the same name. Composed by William Grant Still in 1941, it was the first time that an opera composed by an African American was broadcast on United States television. Also in 1979, Gary Burgess was to become the first black actor and singer to take on the lead role in Rossini's Otello in Wilmington, Delaware. He was a regular on the Buffalo opera scene throughout the early 80s, and he frequently performed with the Buffalo Philharmonic. He headlined or featured in many other events in the city, and at one such event in 1980, he sang a collection of songs arranged by Aaron Copland, the so-called Dean of American Composers, with Copland in attendance. Throughout his career, he was called on to work with some of the most famous conductors: Leonard Bernstein, Richard Boninge, Eugene Ormandy, and many others. In 1985, he co-founded the Buffalo Lyric Opera Theater, later renamed the Greater Buffalo Opera Company, and was its general and artistic director until it closed in 1997. The company staged more than 40 famous operas. In 1994, he explained his motivation for starting the company as a matter of necessity. The budget for music here at UB had been cut, and so one of the reasons I founded the GBO was that I had to have a place for my students to sing. Buffalo was also the only city of its size in the whole country that did not have its own opera company. We are now a nationally recognized regional company.
There was a long history of failed attempts in Buffalo to start an opera company. When Gary was initially approached about trying to establish a company, he saw that as an opportunity to enrich the cultural life of Buffalo, as well as provide crucial developmental opportunities for emerging artists and arts professionals, including his own students. GBOC was successful on both of those fronts. I don't think I would have had the career I had, for example, if not for GBOC.
I think that was his way of giving back and also recognizing youth and people coming along. And I'm going to tell you something, they loved him. Students, people he worked with, whether on stage or at the university, he was popular.
But the early 90s saw rapid growth in home entertainment.
It's National Cable Month.
And in a 1994 University profile, he advocated that the opera was an equal alternative. Opera is a multifaceted art form. There's not just music, there's also singing and scenic design, costuming and makeup. Opera involves many other art forms. There's drama on stage and visual aspects to help people enjoy what's happening. Throughout the 90s, Gary Burgess continued a steady schedule of teaching at the university, heading up the Greater Buffalo Opera Company, giving his students performance opportunities and performing himself. But throughout his entire career while living overseas, he was always finding his way back to Bermuda, and the 1990s saw Gary Burgess perform in Bermuda more and more. In 1996, he curated a successful performance for the Bermuda Festival. The same year, the Bermuda Arts Council honored him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. In 1998, Gary Burgess retired from teaching at the university and returned to Bermuda after being away 40 years. But he didn't sit still for long. He took a position as Cultural Affairs Program Coordinator for the Bermuda government, where he started the Artists in Residence program, which brought musicians and vocalists to Bermuda.
He enjoyed that with the parades and all that kind of thing. Was it below him or above him and all that? I don't even think he thought about that. It was the show must go on.
He also became the director of the Bermuda Philharmonic in 1999, where he composed and debuted two new symphonies, the Bermuda Symphony and Dawn of a New Day. As principal of the Bermuda School of Music, he continued his commitment to excellence in education.
Having benefited himself from a fine education under the guidance of many talented instructors that he had, Gary certainly understood the value of a good education for his own students. And certainly the attitude that he took with me was that he encouraged his own students to expand their studies in keeping with their individual academic abilities. He understood the value in the long term of a more traditional, broad-based, liberal arts kind of education.
In September 2000, Gary Burgess retired from performing altogether. He gave a farewell recital at the Ruth Seton James Auditorium of material that spanned his entire career. His final song was, "When I have sung my songs to you, I will sing no more." But he made the occasional concert appearance in later years. Well into the new millennium, Gary Burgess was a much respected artist and his international reputation was intact. So much so, he was asked to direct Puccini's Madama Butterfly for the opening of the Center for the Performing Arts in Beijing as part of the 2008 Olympic Games. Over his 40-plus-year career, Gary Burgess was featured on major recordings with opera stars like Luciana Pavarotti, Christiana Deuterkom, including 2 recordings with the Greater Buffalo Opera Company. One of the more famous recordings was Europera 5 by avant-garde composer John Cage in 1991. It would be the last opera Cage would compose before his passing a year later. Over his long and distinguished career, he had been presented with many awards, but in 2012, he was recognized by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II with the Queen's Certificate and Badge of Honor.
There are so many things that I carry with me today from my time studying with Gary, but I think if I was forced to name only one, I would say that it would be generosity and attention to others. To my students in the studio, to the audience when I'm performing, to the people around me in my life. I mean, that was Gary.
I think he accomplished his goal of getting what he wanted out of a career in music. It wasn't just the singing part. He left the shores of Bermuda and jumped into the big pool with people that were accomplished. He rubbed elbows with those people, and I think that was amazing for a Bermudian boy turned man to accomplish that. He was respected for his talent and for his ability to put it all together.
Burgess's development as an artist could stand as a role model for aspiring young singers. He has acquired an admirable grasp of the literature and developed an acute sensitivity to pliancy of phrase, nuance, inflection, and wide-ranging tonal coloration. Those who wouldn't respond to the hushed, elevated quality in his performance must have petrified hearts.
Were I gifted with fate and talent, I'd live my form for all to know. Were I a singer with an unsolved talent, my songs to her would flow. Sometimes I feel this luring phantom real. I reach for her, I reach for her in vain. Eludes my eager hand, leaves bare my heart.
It would be almost impossible to list all of Gary Burgess's accomplishments. After all, He enjoyed a professional career overseas for 40 years and went on to become the most celebrated Bermudian musician. When he did return, he shared what he had gained over those 40 years with those of us who worked with and knew him. He was a standard bearer for Bermudian excellence. Gary Burgess was born on May 31, 1938. His life was one of resilience and resolve. He died on June 27, 2014, at the age of 76.